Hello everyone, it is day 24 of our 30 days of watercolor flowers, and today we are painting red clover. Red clover is so fun and easy to paint, it's perfect to add color and texture to your watercolor bouquets. So this is a small flower with lots of texture. It has lots of these spiky pink petals that form an elongated cone. They're called red clover, but they're really this beautiful bright pink color, and I can't wait to show you how I paint them. For the greenery, they have these leaves that are pretty big in comparison to the flower itself, and they're coming right at the base of the flower. A couple of leaves, maybe two or three at the base, and then a stem with more leaves down towards the bottom. I'm going to be following the rule of threes, painting 3 red clover, one in a large size, one medium, and one small. And I feel like doing this will help you see how painting the flower in different shapes and the leaves in different shapes, you can create different sizes and textures and movement. All right, we're going to start by picking up our opera pink, and we want it to be a pretty watery wash because with watercolor, we want to start with our lightest color. I'm also adding cad red to this color to give it just a little bit more depth than that bright neon pink, and I'm making sure to continue to add water until it's that light wash that I really want. To create the red clover texture, you're going to use the tip of your brush using very light pressure and create these short strokes towards yourself, and then continue to go outward and upward until you've got kind of this rounded cone shape. You'll want to maintain some of the white space, but don't worry if a lot of these strokes are blending together a little bit. The goal is to create that texture. So you don't want too much of it merging and blending together. So you can see I've got a lot of great texture on the edge and some great texture on the inside. So I'm going to go to my pink on the palette and pick it up straight from the palette, which means it has a lot less water. It's a lot more highly concentrated, and I'm going to start dabbing that into the red clover while everything is still wet. I want to keep this really minimal, but because my paint on my brush is very highly pigmented, it's not going to bleed too much. That's why you want to make sure your brush is more damp with less water when you add the darker pigmented color that's supposed to bleed a little bit, because you want it to stay really pigmented and just bleed slightly for that blended effect. Now here I've got my medium sized red clover. I didn't make it quite as high, but it's still almost around the same thickness. The reason we want to start with our lighter color but then go in with this more highly concentrated darker color is because with watercolor, everything can be really flat, and so we want to find ways to have light tones, midtones, and dark tones. So the light tone is the first layer that we are putting down, and then the midtone can become that in between blended color as the darker color bleeds into the lighter color. And then our dark tone becomes that really highly concentrated dark color that we are placing very lightly around the flower petals. We're going to let that dry and start working on the greenery. So I'm picking up some sap green and mixing it on my palette. I'm also going to pick up some yellow ochre to make it a little bit brighter, a little bit warmer. I love adding yellow to my greens. It gives it a really nice look. I'm going to start with the leaves because if you remember, the leaves are right at the base of the clover. And I'm going to be using my two-stroke method to make these leaves. So I'm starting with really light pressure on the tip of my brush right at the base of the clover. Then I'm pushing down to create the shape of the leaf, dragging it for the length of the leaf, and then lifting up for light pressure to create the tip of the leaf. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, leaving a little bit of white space in the center for a middle vein. And then as you get used to these two-stroke leaves, you'll be able to change up some of the shapes to create different movements and variations within your leaf. Then I'm going to use the tip of my brush to create some very simple stems. Adding a little bit of curve creates lots of movement and interest in your entire piece. And then especially when you intersect the stems and make sure that all three of them are different lengths. For the red clover in the middle, I am painting the leaves in the same way, but they are smaller and more proportional to the size of that flower. And then as we get to the smallest red clover, because this one almost feels like it's farthest away, the leaves are smaller and less detailed. We can't even really see the white veining in the middle of the leaves, and so I've kind of done more of a rough leaf shape than distinct strokes to create the leaf. Now that the leaves are mostly dry, I've picked up some more sap green and we're going to add some detail to the leaves. So a little bit goes a long way. I am just trying to focus on adding midtones where I feel like there might be a shadow in the leaf. This is the point where I use color to create movement and texture and depth within an object. So with watercolor, it dries pretty flat, even if you get that blended effect. So layering in watercolor is really important. And I like to use harsh lines and contrasting colors or darker tones of the same color to create a lot of that depth and interest to layer onto the watercolor after it's dry. And I know that that takes some practice to understand where to place that intuitively, but you will totally get there. Now all we have left to do is add it to our day 24 spot on our watercolor flower guide. And I just really love red clover. I think it is totally underrated and one of my absolute favorite flowers. It's definitely a great flower to add to your bouquets when you want to add a pop of color and texture. Thanks so much for being here today while we painted day 24 red clover. I will see you all tomorrow for day 25. Bye.